Hello, I'm Liz Crumlish. I'm priest in charge here at St Oswald in Maybole, which is in the Diocese of Glasgow and Galloway. This series, for the season of Lent, spotlights the role of biblical women, named and unnamed, whose stories we find in the pages of Scripture. Women who employed the skills of subversion, persistence, tenacity, and creativity, displaying the kind of leadership that would serve us well today as the Church continues to navigate changing times. In this series, we will encounter in particular Shiphrah, Puah, Jochebed, Bethany, Miriam, Vashti, Esther, Mary, the Mother of God, and Mary of Bethany, as we consider the kind of leadership required as we attempt to plot new landmarks in a liminal season. The series is based on a book, Miriam's Sisters, Deborah's Daughters, published by Canterbury Press in February 2025. It's only recently that I learned that no is a complete sentence. All my life, when I've had to say no to something, I've made excuses, I've justified, I've done loads of explanation. Our no is enough. No was all that Vashti said and set in motion a whole chain of events. Vashti is the queen who is named right at the beginning of the book of Esther. Vashti is the queen who said no. No to entertaining the king's drunken guests. No to making an appearance before a bunch of men who'd been partying together with the king for the last 6 months. No to being paraded as a symbol of her husband's power and success. No to risking her safety and virtue. No. That no reverberated throughout the kingdom. You can just imagine it as the rumour mill started up and the news of the Queen's no was passed from household to household, as it was gossiped about in stairwells and street corners. The men, horrified by such an unthinkable turn of events. The women, quietly delighted as they heard the news down by the river or at the well, all those places that they went about their chores. The women delighted in the story, while fragile male egos were threatened by such an unthinkable refusal. So much so that a new law was passed that all women must do whatever their husbands said. Anyone with eyes to see and ears to hear could tell that this law was a result of the misuse of power and the attempt to control. It often takes time, but truth will emerge. And when it does, it disrupts the carefully constructed facade that's there to disguise the actions of those who crave power at any cost. Queen Vashti's no in itself merits a place in the canon of Scripture. But the events set in motion by her single act of defiance give way to a fascinating chapter in the history of God's people. The king moved on and found himself a new queen, one who was shrewd and who knew how to work within the corridors of power to get what she wanted. Esther, the new queen, practiced her minority faith within the palace walls. She adapted her spiritual practices to merge with life in the royal household. And when the time came for her to act, she had manoeuvred herself into the right place at the right time. And she managed to do that because those around her thought she was overly naive. Esther spoke her truth and pulled back the covers on the evil that was being perpetrated by those intent on taking power for themselves. And when Esther saw that her people and her faith was threatened, she spoke up and her people were saved. I love to imagine that Esther and Vashti in later years were able to meet up and share their stories with one another and compare notes about how they handled the king. And perhaps the king himself, as he recognised faithfulness and conviction of faith in Esther, realised how different it could have been with Vashti by his side. He may even have resolved to cherish, respect, and protect his queen as they moved on with life together. Maybe he even belatedly recognised and admired Vashti's courage in saying no. Sometimes leadership looks pretty much like resistance. Sometimes leadership consists in saying no. Remembering the story of Vashti, how often do you feel the need to explain or to justify your no? How might we adapt our faith practices to fit into the context that we inhabit today? And what might empower us to speak up for those or to give voice to those whose lives are endangered by the powerful, by climate change, by immigration policies, by the narrative of scarcity rather than abundance?